Hey friends, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing Channel. What do we've got here? You'll recall when I introduced you to the concept of non-mechanical SRT. The very first scenario was a system where the knots were tied in advance, and I didn't need to tie any knot at the tree. That system used a friction hitch, the JRB Ascender hitch, and it used a running loop of the Scott's locked Bowline. Today I'm going to show you how we can also use a Bowline on the Bight. And here, instead of the JRB Ascender, I've got a Longhorn Agile hitch. But you can see I can pretty reliably pass this through. Now I'm not going to tell you that there aren't problems that could happen. This has happened where I tried to get that, but it's just caught on the knob. So the Longhorn Agile definitely has a disadvantage in that it's bulkier. It's more prone to getting stuck. But with a large enough loop here, we can get it through. And the reason I am switching here in this configuration to the Bowline on the Bight is because, as the name implies, it can be tied on the Bight. I don't need the end of the rope to form it. The end of the rope might have something else on it. So here's the end of that rope. Well, I like my climbing systems to be ready for multiple scenarios and methods. So for this tiny system, it's contrived, but I've got another friction hitch on the end. And it wouldn't be fun to tie a Scott's locked Bowline with this, but I can create a Bowline on the Bight and fairly reliably pass this up. So let me start by showing you how to tie it. Here I've got a piece of rope, and I'm going to choose about an arm's length, about 20 inches or so. And I'm going to intentionally, it would be a Bowline on the Bight if these lines were in any position, but I'm going to intentionally, for this Canopy anchor application, I'm going to have the working end on the left side. And if you're familiar with the Bowline, just a few inches in, it starts like a Bowline with two strands. I create an overhand turn. I then take the working loop at the bottom, I pass it up through, and I'm not going to be real concerned if I've got a twist in that or not. It really doesn't matter. And then I pass this around the entire assembly, and pull slack into the loop. As with all of our knots, we try to dress it so that there aren't any overlaps, any asymmetrical overlaps. So I haven't dressed it fully yet, but let's just get a look at that. That's the back, that's the front. Let's tighten it. There's 3 double strands headed into this, and I'll pull on all of them. That is a Bowline on the Bight. And if there was something here on the end, it wouldn't get in our way. I'm going to tie it again, but this time using this assembly. Okay, so in my hand here is this tiny little climbing system just built for this demonstration. And if you look at the two ends, one end has got that friction hitch that I'm going to climb on. It's headed into the length of rope. I want to prepare that so that it's ready to rig up in the tree. By prepare it, I mean I don't want anything that could get in the way of passing through that Bowline on the Bight. I'll take these two ends from the Longhorn Agile and I'll tuck them under the descending strand, keep them from sticking out laterally, and I'll take this end of the rope and I'll do the same. Just get that as compact as possible. It's still a fair-sized assembly. So I've got that ready. Now, the other side of my system, it might have something on it. It depends. If you're building an SRT system only, well, then it probably wouldn't, and you could just tie your Bowline on the Bight. But if we're taking a system that also can be used for hitch climbing, there might be another friction hitch or 2 friction hitches on the other end of the line. And so just disregard what's there. Disregard what's there and assume that, so this is the tail end on the left. Just use a little extra rope. This is the tail end in the back, and I've got, I don't know, about 18 inches hanging down here. Here's where I'm going to form my bowline on the Bight. Make an overhand loop, take the end, put it through, and then go around the whole assembly. Go around the whole assembly and lengthen the loop. And there we have it. Of course, untying it, we reverse that process. I'll go over that in a moment. But now, let's rig this into the tree. So here's my paracord preset. I'm going to clip it into my friction hitch. Of course, this won't go through a really tight crotch, but most crotches it'll go through. And now I've got to make sure my paracord is being passed down through the bowline on the Bight. And now, by manipulating the position of this as it leaves me on the ground, I can get this strand kind of on the bottom. I just give it a little twist, because as it leaves my hand, I want this to be roughly horizontal. And I can control that by pulling here. I can get this thing so it roughly acts in a horizontal fashion. Now, I urge you to make sure that this is big enough. It's got to be at least big enough to get your fist through, and that could vary based on your diameters. Okay, and to untie it, pretty straightforward. We just break that Bight and lengthen it and pull it over the assembly. Okay, now I don't want to confuse anybody, and please use the website jrbtreeclimbing.com to help you. But I've showed you some other secure loops in the past, right? This is the Alpine Butterfly. It's also tieable on the Bight, and this was my first choice. I tried using this. It didn't work as well as the bowline on the Bight, and it simply has to do with the shape of it. The shape isn't as good. It's just harder to get this in a shape where it's reliably going to pass. And you can notice that the plane of the loop is not ideal. You know, sometimes it'll stay there and sometimes it won't. But it's basically just two teardrop shaped. But it is tieable on the Bight, but it's not as good as what I just showed you. Here's a secure end loop I showed you before. This is the Scott's locked bowline, and this does sit nicely. But if I have any junk on the end of my rope, any extra friction hitches or whatever, then this is not ideal. And I've also showed you the figure 8 on a Bight, or figure 8 end loop. This is just really flexible rope, but it's also got that teardrop shape, and it doesn't really sit well. Plenty strong, but again, think of these knots as tools in your toolbox, and we get out the right tool for the right application. Okay, bowline on the Bight. I've got my rope. Here's the tail end you see on the left, and I've got a pretty healthy, this one's going to be just a little bit bigger. And again, remember, there could have been a knot, there could have been anything over here that's going to prevent me from forming a regular bowline. Create an overhand loop, overhand turn, take the end, pass it through, pass it around the whole assembly. I try not to make it bigger than I need to do that. And I'm really not concerned too much if these loops have overlap. This one exits on the top and enters in the bottom. That doesn't bother me. I could get rid of it by tying it in a more precise sequence, but if anything, that just seems to help me. Pulling on that real good. And what I want to make sure is, as I'm using this as a canopy anchor, I always put the line in the way I tied it, the same way I tied it. And this strand, I give it a little twist. Give it a little twist to keep it under. But I know I'm doing well if I can get this to kind of sit horizontally. That's the goal. Now, if you don't have a friction hitch on the end of your line, there's a lot of other options we can use here. We can use a quick link, we can use a quickie, we can use a Maverick variant, we can use an Alpine butterfly, of course a Scott's Lock Bowline, but this is tieable in the Bight and will sit kind of horizontal and allow me to get my friction hitch through. Okay, so you'll be seeing this in a climbing video soon, but I wanted you to have the background. There you have it, Bowline on the Bight, and there it's gone. You can leave it on the system if you're going to be SRT climbing, and you can take it off if you're converting to hitch climbing. I'll see you in a tree. Thank you.